Illegal now, but normal to eat in the 1980s. Think back to the 1980s. Dinner time was simple, and no one questioned what was on their plate. But what if some of those everyday foods are now banned? Today, eating them could lead to fines or legal trouble. So, what once popular foods have disappeared for good? Let's find out. Raw milk. Many people believed that milk came straight from the farm, untouched and unprocessed, just as nature intended. For generations, families drank raw milk without a second thought, pouring it fresh from the pail into glasses at the breakfast table. Even by the 1980s, raw milk remained a staple in rural communities and among health-conscious consumers who swore by its rich flavor and supposed health benefits. To them, pasteurized milk just couldn't compare. But while some saw it as pure and wholesome, public health officials saw something else: a potential breeding ground for deadly bacteria. Unlike the milk neatly lined up in grocery store refrigerators, raw milk skips the pasteurization process, which kills harmful pathogens. Supporters argued that this preserved vital nutrients and enzymes, but scientists and regulators pointed to the serious risks. Contaminants like Salmonella, Listeria, and E. coli could easily make their way into an unpasteurized batch, leading to severe illness or even death. As outbreaks continued, the government stepped in. In 1987, the FDA banned the interstate sale of raw milk, and states began imposing their own restrictions. Some outlawed it completely, while others allowed it under strict conditions, often requiring direct farm-to-consumer purchases. Yet, despite the regulations and health warnings, raw milk never fully disappeared. To this day, it has a loyal following, with enthusiasts insisting that modern hygiene practices make it safer than ever. Whether a relic of the past or a defiant nod to tradition, raw milk remains one of the most controversial foods in America's history. Alar-Treated Apples. And it wasn't just dairy that raised concerns. One of the most unexpected food scares of the 1980s involved something as simple as an apple. For generations, apples were the very definition of wholesome eating, a staple in school lunchboxes, the star of homemade pies, and a crisp, refreshing snack after a long day. Parents felt good about giving their kids apples, and doctors even had a saying about them keeping health problems away. But in the late 1980s, this beloved fruit became the center of a nationwide panic that shook the food industry to its core. The reason? A chemical called alar. Originally introduced in the 1960s, alar, scientifically known as diacetyl, was a game-changer for apple growers. It kept apples looking fresh longer, ensured they ripened at the same time, and minimized waste by preventing early fruit drop. Supermarkets loved it because it meant perfectly uniform apples on their shelves. Farmers relied on it to deliver high-quality produce. And consumers? Well, for years, they had no idea they were eating apples treated with a chemical that, once broken down, produced UDMH, a compound later linked to cancer in lab tests. Then came 1989. A bombshell 60 Minutes report declared apples the most dangerous food in American grocery stores, and overnight, the fruit that had symbolized health and simplicity became a symbol of fear. Parents stopped packing apples in school lunches, cafeterias pulled them from their menus, and apple farmers suddenly found themselves at the center of a media firestorm. Under immense public pressure, the EPA swiftly banned alar for food use, forcing growers to scramble for safer alternatives. Looking back, it's hard to believe that something as simple as an apple could have sparked such a nationwide crisis. But in a time before social media, when one TV report could change everything, that's exactly what happened. DDT-Treated Produce. While alar caused panic over fruit safety, it was just one piece of a larger issue. Our food was loaded with chemicals. Nowhere was this more evident than in the widespread use of pesticides, particularly DDT. Indeed, by the mid-20th century, pesticides were more than just a tool for farmers. They were seen as a revolution in agriculture. With promises of abundant harvests, fewer pests, and flawless produce, these chemicals became an essential part of modern farming. Among them, DDT, dichlorodiphenyl trichloroethane, stood out as the ultimate solution, used on everything from potatoes to tomatoes. For years, DDT was celebrated as a scientific breakthrough, ensuring crops thrived while keeping insects at bay. It was so widely used that most consumers had no idea they were regularly eating fruits and vegetables, treated with what would later become one of the most infamous banned substances in history. Farmers relied on it, and the government encouraged it. But beneath the surface, problems were brewing. By the 1960s, troubling research began to emerge. Scientists linked DDT exposure to severe health risks, including liver damage, reproductive disorders, and even cancer. But the harm didn't stop with humans. Wildlife populations suffered immensely, especially birds. DDT weakened eggshells, causing drastic declines in species like the bald eagle, a national symbol of strength and resilience. The pesticide that once seemed like a miracle was now being recognized as a silent killer. The turning point came in 1972, when the EPA officially banned DDT for agricultural use in the United States. But the damage had already been done. Traces of the pesticide lingered in soil for years, and imported produce continued to carry residual amounts well into the 1980s. What began as a scientific triumph had turned into an environmental disaster, proving that sometimes the cost of progress is far greater than we ever anticipate. Lead-contaminated candy and packaging. If pesticides were an invisible danger on our fruits and vegetables, another risk was hiding in something even sweeter: candy. This one was especially alarming. For kids growing up in the 1980s, nothing felt more magical than unwrapping a piece of candy. Whether it was a rainbow-colored lollipop, a handful of chewy sweets, or a tamarind treat with just the right balance of sweet and sour, candy was an everyday delight, cheap, fun, and everywhere. But hidden beneath that sugary bliss was a danger no one saw coming: lead contamination. The problem wasn't in the candy itself, but in the packaging. Some manufacturers, especially those producing imported treats, used lead-based ink on wrappers or lead-glazed containers. Over time, microscopic lead particles would seep into the candy, turning an innocent childhood treat into a silent health threat. And for children, lead poisoning was especially dangerous. Even small amounts could lead to developmental delays, learning disabilities, and permanent neurological damage, all from something as simple as enjoying a piece of candy. By the late 80s and early 90s, regulators finally took notice. The FDA and state health departments cracked down, targeting imported candies from regions with looser safety standards, particularly Mexico and parts of Asia. Testing became more rigorous, and by the 2000s, strict lead limits were enforced across the industry. Despite the scare, candy remained as beloved as ever. Companies adjusted, safety regulations improved, and the lead contamination crisis faded into history. But for those who grew up in that era, the memory of tearing into a brightly colored wrapper now comes with the unsettling realization that their favorite childhood treats may have contained more than just sugar. If you find this video helpful and it brings back a lot of memories for you, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support is a great motivation for us. Potassium bromate in bread. Soft, fluffy, and perfectly risen, bread in the 1980s was everything consumers wanted it to be. Whether it was stacked with cold cuts for a lunchtime sandwich, slathered with butter at the dinner table, or toasted to golden perfection in the morning, bread was a staple in nearly every household. But what seemed like a harmless baking trick turned into a serious health concern. Behind that light, airy texture was potassium bromate, an additive widely used by commercial bakeries to strengthen dough and create consistently soft, high-rising loaves. It was a baker's dream, helping bread hold its shape, develop a fine crumb, and maintain a longer shelf life. At the time, no one thought twice about it. If anything, it was seen as a sign of quality. However, as food science advanced, researchers discovered a darker side to this seemingly miraculous ingredient. Studies linked potassium bromate to kidney and thyroid cancers in lab animals, sparking serious concerns about its safety. Countries like the UK, Canada, and the entire European Union quickly banned it, removing it from all food products. Meanwhile, in the US, the response was slower. Though some states restricted its use, and many manufacturers voluntarily phased it out, potassium bromate was never fully banned nationwide, meaning, shockingly, it can still be found in some baked goods today. It's unsettling to realize that an ingredient once considered essential for perfect bread was later classified as a potential carcinogen. But history has shown time and again that what seems harmless today can become a major health concern tomorrow. And potassium bromate is just one of many examples. Microwave popcorn with diacetyl. If you grew up in the 1980s, you probably remember those classic movie nights at home. Lights dimmed, VHS tapes rolling, and that unmistakable buttery aroma filling the air. Back then, nothing completed the experience quite like a bag of microwave popcorn. It was a game changer, making snack time effortless. Gone were the days of shaking a pot over the stove or waiting in line at the theater just to get your hands on some fresh popcorn. Instead, all you had to do was toss a bag into the microwave, listen for the kernels to pop, and within minutes, you had a warm, crispy, buttery treat that tasted just like the real thing. Or at least, that's what we thought. But here's the shocking truth. That rich, buttery flavor, it wasn't butter at all. Instead, it came from diacetyl, a chemical specifically designed to mimic the taste and aroma of real butter. While it made popcorn irresistible, it also came with a hidden danger. For factory workers inhaling it daily, diacetyl turned out to be a silent killer. Over time, exposure to this chemical led to a devastating lung disease, later known as popcorn lung. As awareness grew, so did public outrage. By the early 2000s, a wave of lawsuits and mounting pressure from health advocates forced companies to remove diacetyl from their recipes. Today, microwave popcorn is still around, but longtime fans know it's just not the same. If you've ever wondered why your favorite movie time snack doesn't taste like it used to, well, now you know the reason. So, which old food or drink do you wish would make a comeback? Let us know in the comment. Canned goods with BPA and lead soldering. There was a time when every pantry had its fair share of canned goods. Whether it was a quick weeknight dinner, an easy side dish, or a last-minute dessert, those neatly stacked tins were a symbol of convenience. And among them, few were as beloved as canned peaches, golden slices floating in thick, sugary syrup, perfect for cobblers, fruit salads, or straight from the can with a spoon. But while the peaches themselves were wholesome and familiar, the cans they came in held a hidden danger: lead. For decades, many food cans were sealed with lead-based solder, a practice that seemed harmless at the time, but would later be recognized as a serious health threat. What made it worse was how the syrup inside interacted with the metal, slowly drawing lead into the fruit. The longer those cans sat on store shelves, or in the back of a kitchen cupboard, the more lead seeped into the food. Scientists eventually confirmed what some health experts had long feared. Even small amounts of lead exposure could lead to developmental delays in children, neurological disorders, and long-term organ damage. As awareness grew, so did public concern. By the late 1980s, pressure from health agencies and consumer advocacy groups pushed regulators to take action. In 1991, the FDA officially banned lead-soldered cans in the U.S., forcing manufacturers to adopt safer alternatives. While canned peaches and other preserved fruits are still a staple in many households, their packaging is now far safer than it was back in the day. For those who grew up enjoying them, it's a reminder of how something as simple as a can of fruit could carry risks no one saw coming. Shark fin soup. For centuries, fine dining wasn't just about flavor, it was about status. And few dishes symbolized prestige more than a steaming bowl of shark fin soup. Reserved for the most lavish banquets, grand weddings, and high-stakes business deals, this delicacy was a sign of wealth, generosity, and tradition. But beneath the elegant presentation and cultural significance lay a hidden cost, one that wasn't just measured in dollars, but in the devastating impact on the ocean itself. By the 1980s, demand for shark fins had surged worldwide, fueling an industry built on a gruesome and wasteful practice known as shark finning. Fishermen would haul in sharks, slice off their prized fins, and discard the still living creatures back into the water, where they would sink helplessly to the ocean floor. This wasn't just cruel, it was catastrophic for marine ecosystems. Scientists began sounding the alarm, warning that entire shark populations were collapsing, throwing the delicate balance of ocean life into chaos. Yet, despite growing environmental concerns, shark fin soup remained a sought-after dish. Many consumers either didn't know or chose to ignore the brutal reality behind their bowl of soup. But the damage didn't stop at marine life. Food safety advocates raised another red flag. Shark meat contained dangerously high levels of mercury, making frequent consumption a serious health risk. Over time, regulations tightened, awareness grew, and attitudien gana foreign to wortin du foreign foraid. But for decades, this one dish stood as a stark reminder of how luxury and excess often come at a price far greater than we realize. Foie gras. Few foods have sparked as much debate as foie gras. Once considered the pinnacle of fine dining, this controversial delicacy has long been associated with luxury, exclusivity, and gourmet cuisine. Served in upscale restaurants and at lavish dinner parties, it was a dish reserved for those with refined palates. But behind its rich, buttery texture lies a production process that has drawn heavy criticism. Ducks and geese raised for foie gras aren't just fed, they're force-fed in a process known as gavage. Several times a day, a tube is inserted down their throats to funnel large quantities of corn-based feed into their stomachs, causing their livers to expand up to 10 times their normal size. The result? A creamy, indulgent product beloved by chefs and food enthusiasts. But the cost is far greater than just the price tag. Many birds suffer from extreme discomfort, breathing difficulties, and organ failure. For years, foie gras remained a staple of elite culinary culture, with supporters arguing that the practice was deeply rooted in French tradition. However, growing awareness of animal welfare issues changed public perception. California became one of the first states to take a stand, banning the sale and production of foie gras, despite strong opposition from chefs and industry leaders. The controversy escalated all the way to the Supreme Court, where the ban was upheld, cementing the state's stance on ethical food sourcing. Today, more states and countries have followed California's lead, prohibiting the force-feeding of animals for food production. While foie gras still has a dedicated following, its place in modern dining is more contested than ever. What was once a symbol of wealth and indulgence is now at the center of a larger conversation about ethics, tradition, and the future of food. Ackee fruit. Exotic, vibrant, and rich in history, the ackee fruit is a staple in West African cuisine and has long been cherished in Jamaica, where it holds the honor of being the national fruit. If you've ever had a plate of Jamaica's famous ackee and salt fish, you know just how creamy and satisfying this unique fruit can be. But despite its cultural significance and beloved flavor, ackee has one major problem, one that has kept it off American grocery store shelves. Inside this seemingly harmless fruit lies a hidden danger: hypoglycin, a toxin that can cause severe illness if consumed improperly. If eaten before fully ripening, ackee can trigger a violent reaction known as Jamaican vomiting sickness, a condition that's about as unpleasant as it sounds. Symptoms range from extreme nausea and dizziness to dangerously low blood sugar levels, which in severe cases can be fatal. Because of these risks, the FDA has long imposed strict regulations on the fruit, effectively banning its importation into the U.S. unless properly processed. Still, for those who grew up eating ackee, it remains an irreplaceable part of their heritage. Many believe that with proper handling and preparation, the fruit poses no more risk than any other ingredient that requires careful cooking. But as far as American regulators are concerned, the line between delicacy and danger is simply too thin to take the chance. If you find this video interesting, please comment 1 to let me know you'll be watching until the end. Unpasteurized cheese. For cheese lovers in the 1980s, the dairy aisle was a playground of possibilities. From the classic American slices perfect for grilled cheese sandwiches to the rich, complex flavors of imported European cheeses, there was no shortage of options. But tucked among those gourmet selections was a hidden danger, one that most shoppers never even considered. Unpasteurized, raw milk cheeses, long celebrated for their depth of flavor and creamy textures, carried a significant health risk that few were aware of at the time. Traditional cheeses from France, Italy, and Spain, like Brie, Camembert, and Roquefort, had been made the same way for generations, using time-honored techniques that emphasized taste over modern food safety measures. Their unpasteurized nature allowed them to develop a complexity that cheese connoisseurs adored. But there was a downside. Without the pasteurization process to eliminate harmful bacteria, these cheeses could become breeding grounds for dangerous pathogens, including Listeria monocytogenes. Unlike a mild case of food poisoning, Listeria posed a particularly severe risk, especially for pregnant women, the elderly, and individuals with weakened immune systems. In the worst cases, it could lead to listeriosis, an infection with a disturbingly high fatality rate. This wasn't just a hypothetical concern. By the late 80s, multiple foodborne illness outbreaks had been linked to unpasteurized cheeses, prompting swift action from public health officials. Regulations tightened, and unregulated raw milk cheeses started disappearing from everyday grocery store shelves. While they are still available in select specialty shops today, gone are the days when shoppers could casually pick up an unpasteurized wedge of Brie without a second thought. The love for raw milk cheese hasn't faded, but the rules surrounding its sale and consumption have changed dramatically, proving once again that when it comes to food, tradition and safety don't always go hand in hand. Artificial food dyes. Nothing screams childhood quite like a bowl of wobbly neon-colored gelatin. Whether it was served in a towering layered dessert at a family potluck or shaped into some wildly creative and slightly questionable 80s concoction, Jell-O was everywhere. It was cheap, ridiculously easy to make, and came in an array of colors that looked more like something from an art project than actual food. But those vibrant hues, they didn't come from nature. They came from artificial food dyes, some of which would later spark serious health concerns. Take red number 3, for instance. This dye was a staple in many gelatin products, adding that signature bright cherry color, until studies linked it to thyroid tumors in lab animals. Yellow number 5 and blue number 1. both common in Jell-O, also came under scrutiny, with concerns about their potential effects on children's behavior. While food manufacturers insisted that these dyes were safe in small amounts, consumer advocacy groups weren't so sure. By the 1990s and early 2000s, the controversy gained momentum. Several European countries began banning or heavily restricting certain artificial colors, pushing companies to rethink their formulations. In the US, the FDA imposed stricter labeling requirements, and some brands voluntarily adjusted their recipes. Yet, despite all the concerns and scientific debates, Jell-O never lost its charm. It remained a nostalgic favorite, proving that no amount of controversy could shake its place in American kitchens. After all, few foods have the power to bring back childhood memories, quite like a spoonful of jiggly, fruit-flavored gelatin. Trans fats. Remember the days when fast food felt like a special treat, not just a quick bite? Whether it was the joy of unwrapping a perfectly seared burger, the smell of piping hot fries fresh from the fryer, or the irresistible crunch of golden fried chicken, fast food in the 1980s was more than just convenient. It was an experience. It was quick, affordable, and most importantly, deliciously satisfying. But hidden behind that crispy, flavorful perfection was an ingredient that would later be exposed as a major health risk: trans fats. At the time, partially hydrogenated oils were the gold standard for frying. They extended shelf life, improved texture, and gave fried foods that unmistakable crunch. Best of all for fast food chains, they were cheaper than natural alternatives. For years, these oils were used in everything from French fries to pastries, with little concern about the long-term effects. That is, until science caught up. By the 1990s, research painted a grim picture. Trans fats didn't just raise bad cholesterol, they also lowered good cholesterol, skyrocketing the risk of heart disease and strokes. Unlike other dietary fats, they offered zero health benefits, making them one of the most harmful food additives ever approved for human consumption. Regulators could no longer ignore the problem. The first steps toward change came in the early 2000s when the FDA began enforcing stricter labeling requirements. Then, in 2015, they made it official. Trans fats were declared unsafe for human consumption. Fast food giants scrambled to adjust, reformulating recipes and switching to healthier oils. Though the fast food industry has evolved, those who grew up in the 80s can still remember a time when deep-fried indulgence came with a hidden cost, one that took decades to uncover. Caffeinated alcohol. The 1980s weren't just a golden era for neon fashion and blockbuster movies. It was also a time when alcohol took on a whole new identity. Beer and whiskey were no longer the only options. Flavored wine coolers exploded onto the scene, offering a sweeter, more playful alternative. Brands like Bartles and Jamie's led the charge, crafting fruity, fizzy drinks that felt more like soda than alcohol. They were light, refreshing, and dangerously easy to drink, perfect for a backyard barbecue or a night out with friends. But some companies weren't satisfied with just sweetness. They wanted a little extra kick. That's when they made a bold move, adding caffeine to the mix. On paper, it seemed like a winning formula: alcohol for relaxation, caffeine to keep the party going. In reality, it was a dangerous cocktail. Alcohol slows down the body, while caffeine keeps drinkers alert, tricking them into feeling more sober than they actually were. This led to more binge drinking, blackouts, and severe alcohol poisoning, with many people drinking far beyond their limits without realizing it. By the early 2000s, the issue resurfaced in a big way with the rise of caffeinated alcoholic drinks like Four Loko, but the problem had been brewing for decades, ever since the first caffeinated wine coolers hit the market. Eventually, regulators stepped in, and in 2010, the FDA banned pre-mixed caffeinated alcoholic beverages, forcing companies to pull them from store shelves. Flavored wine coolers may have survived, but their caffeinated counterparts became a cautionary tale, a reminder that not every fun new trend is as harmless as it seems. Bushmeat. Can you believe that back in the 1980s, food was not just a source of nutrition, it was an adventure? People sought out bold flavors, exotic ingredients, and rare delicacies, eager to try something beyond the ordinary. For some, that meant indulging in bushmeat, a term used for wild game like monkeys, bats, and even big cats, smuggled from Africa into underground markets in the US. At the time, it was seen as a rare, prized delicacy, often enjoyed by immigrants longing for a taste of home, or by thrill seekers eager to try something truly unconventional. But beneath the allure of these so-called exotic flavors lurked a hidden danger. Unlike farm-raised meat, bushmeat came straight from the wild, carrying deadly pathogens that had no place in the human food chain. Scientists later linked it to zoonotic diseases like Ebola and even early strains of HIV, raising red flags within the medical community. By the early 2000s, the risks became too great to ignore. The US government cracked down, banning the sale and import of bushmeat to prevent potential outbreaks. What was once a secret indulgence for a select few quickly vanished from underground markets. It's astonishing to think that something as simple as a meal could carry such devastating consequences. But for those who remember the era, bushmeat remains a controversial chapter in the ever-evolving story of food, one that serves as a stark reminder of the fine line between culinary curiosity and public health disaster. The 1980s was a decade of big ideas, bold experiments, and spectacular flops. Some products were ahead of their time, while others were just plain disasters. From bizarre gadgets to failed soft drinks, these inventions promised the future, but never quite made it. Let's take a look back at the biggest product failures of the 80s. Gullwing doors. Gullwing doors have always had a futuristic, almost sci-fi appeal. When they first hit the scene, people imagined a world where every car would have them, sleek, stylish, and effortlessly cool. A big part of that dream came from the DeLorean DMC-12, made famous by Back to the Future. That car wasn't just a movie prop, it became a symbol of what people thought the future of automobiles should look like. But here we are, decades later. And guess what? Most of us are still opening our car doors the old-fashioned way, outward, not upward. So what happened? As it turns out, gullwing doors look amazing, but they come with some serious real-world problems. The biggest issue? Safety. If a car with gullwing doors flips over in an accident, the driver and passengers can become trapped inside with no way to push the doors open. That's a terrifying thought. On top of that, these doors need extra space to open, which makes them impractical in tight parking spots. They also require complex hinges and gas struts to function properly, making them more expensive to maintain. So, while gullwing doors might always have a place in our imaginations, they never quite became the norm in everyday cars. Vibroson. In the 1980s, Vibroson International decided to revolutionize home relaxation by creating something that looked straight out of a sci-fi movie, the vibrating sauna. It wasn't just a sauna, it was an all-in-one luxury pod, combining heat therapy, entertainment, and massage into one bizarre-looking contraption. The concept was ambitious. Imagine stepping into a personal sauna where your body was surrounded by 170 degrees Fahrenheit of dry heat, but your head stayed cool thanks to a built-in face fan. And while you sweated out toxins, you could kick back in a massaging chair that vibrated to relieve tension. To top it off, the unit even came with a built-in stereo system, letting you enjoy your favorite tunes while getting cooked like a rotisserie chicken. Sounds fancy, right? Well, it came at a hefty price tag, $5,995. For that much money, you got a futuristic relaxation machine, but you also had to find space for it. At nearly the size of a small phone booth, it wasn't exactly easy to fit into the average home. And let's be honest, who really needed a vibrating sauna when a regular sauna or massage chair worked just fine on their own? Ultimately, the Vibrason was one of those because we can inventions rather than a because we needed one. While it may have appealed to those with too much money and too much space, it never became the must-have wellness device of the decade. Kodak disc film. In 1982, Kodak set out to revolutionize photography with the disc film system, introducing a new kind of camera that was compact, lightweight, and easy to carry. Traditional cameras were often bulky, but Kodak's Disc 4000 and other models promised a more convenient way to snap photos. Instead of using standard film rolls, these cameras relied on small circular discs, each containing 15 tiny negatives. The idea was to make photography more portable and user-friendly. On paper, it seemed like a great innovation. The cameras were sleek, and loading the film was effortless. Just pop in a disc, and you were ready to go. However, there was one big problem. The negatives were way too small. This meant that the photo quality was terrible, grainy, blurry, and lacking detail. While it was convenient, it simply couldn't compete with 35mm film or even older formats. By 1988, Kodak stopped producing the cameras, though they continued making the film until 1999 for those who still had them. In the end, the disc film system became one of Kodak's biggest flops. It was an idea ahead of its time, but poor image quality sealed its fate. Still, it was a step toward the compact, easy-to-use photography that would eventually become the norm with digital cameras and smartphones. Fisher-Price PXL 2000. By the late 1980s, the home video revolution was in full swing. Camcorders were becoming a must-have for families, capturing everything from birthday parties to family vacations. But Fisher-Price saw an untapped market: kids. In 1987, they introduced the PXL 2000, a camcorder specifically designed for young filmmakers. Unlike traditional camcorders that used VHS tapes, the PXL 2000 recorded low-resolution black-and-white video onto standard audio cassette tapes. This made it cheaper and more compact, but it also resulted in pixelated, grainy footage that looked more like an early digital experiment than a high-quality recording. Despite its limitations, it was still a cool concept, a real working video camera for kids. However, the price tag was a major problem. At $180, it was twice the cost of a Nintendo Entertainment System, NES, making it a tough sell for parents. As a result, Fisher-Price sold fewer than 500,000 units before discontinuing the product in 1988. But here's the twist. While the PXL 2000 was a commercial failure, it has since gained a cult following. Filmmakers and artists love its dreamlike, lo-fi aesthetic, and you can still find videos shot on it floating around YouTube. What was once a failed toy is now a collector's item and a quirky piece of video history. Seiko TV Watch. In the early 1980s, portable technology was taking off. With the massive success of Sony's Walkman, companies were eager to push the limits of what could be carried on the go. That's where Seiko came in with the Seiko TV Watch, a gadget straight out of a spy movie. Released in 1982 and 1983, this wasn't just a wristwatch, it was a wearable television. At first glance, the Seiko TV Watch looked like a normal digital watch, but hidden in the face was a tiny 1.2-inch LCD screen. The idea? You could watch live television right on your wrist, a concept that seemed like the future of personal entertainment. It even had an FM tuner, giving you the option to listen to the radio as well. But while it sounded revolutionary, there was a catch, actually several catches. To actually watch TV, you had to connect the watch to a pocket-sized TV tuner, which then had to be wired to a pair of headphones. So instead of being a sleek, all-in-one device, it turned into a tangled mess of cables and extra gadgets. And at $495, a hefty price tag in the 80s, it was far from affordable for most consumers. Which product do you think was the biggest disaster of the decade? Would you have given it a chance? Do-it-all system. Back in the 1980s, tech companies were already dreaming of an all-in-one device that could handle multiple everyday tasks. Enter the do-it-all system, a gadget that promised to live up to its name by cramming several useful features into one compact device. This little powerhouse fit in the palm of your hand and included an AM/FM stereo, a microcassette recorder and player, a calculator, and even a digital clock with an alarm. At the time, this was cutting-edge convenience. Instead of carrying separate devices for music, timekeeping, and calculations, you had one sleek unit that could handle it all. But despite its ambitious design, the do-it-all system never really caught on. The technology just wasn't quite there yet. Switching between functions wasn't as smooth as people wanted, and the microcassette format quickly became outdated. Not to mention, the idea of an all-in-one device was still a little too futuristic for most consumers. People were comfortable with their separate radios, calculators, and alarm clocks, and they weren't quite ready to replace them with one multi-use gadget. Dome homes. If you were around in the 1980s, you might remember spotting the occasional dome home, a round, futuristic-looking house that seemed like it came straight out of a sci-fi movie. They weren't exactly common, and for good reason. While they were meant to be the home of the future, their unusual appearance made them a tough sell. One company, Monterey Domes, based in Riverside, California, claimed in 1981 that their dome-shaped houses were the most energy-efficient homes in the world. The design wasn't just for looks, it had a purpose. The curved shape reduced heat loss, while rigid foam insulation and solar heating systems helped keep energy costs low. On top of that, these homes required fewer building materials than traditional houses, making them more cost-effective to construct. On paper, dome homes seemed like a brilliant idea. They were cheaper, eco-friendly, and energy-efficient, a winning combination. But there was one big problem. They just looked too weird. People weren't ready to give up their traditional square and rectangular homes for something that looked like a giant igloo or a spaceship. Despite their practical benefits, the unusual design was a deal-breaker for most buyers. In the end, dome homes never became the norm. While some experimental communities still feature them, they remain a quirky relic of a time when people thought the future of housing might be a little more round. Thank you for watching our video. Where are you from? Comment below and let's connect. Private eye. Back in the 1980s, long before virtual reality headsets or smart glasses, there was a bold attempt to revolutionize personal displays. Enter the private eye, a futuristic-looking video monitor developed by reflection technology. This device packed a tiny 1-inch screen into a head-mounted display, but thanks to clever optics, it appeared as large as a 12-inch screen to the wearer. It was an early attempt at wearable tech, designed for hands-free viewing. At first glance, it seemed like the future of portable displays. Imagine being able to watch a video, read data, or play games without needing a bulky monitor. But there was a problem. It made people sick. Many users reported feeling nauseous or dizzy after just a short time using it. The optics created a strange viewing experience that didn't sit well with the human eye. On top of that, it was expensive and had very limited practical use. Atari CX77 Touch Tablet. When Atari burst onto the scene in the 1970s, it changed home entertainment forever. By the early 1980s, the brand was everywhere, dominating the gaming world. Looking to expand beyond video games, Atari decided to branch out into digital creativity with a futuristic gadget, the CX-77 touch tablet. At first glance, this device seemed like a game changer. It promised to let users draw on-screen, bringing a hands-on approach to digital art. For kids and hobbyists, it was an exciting idea, an early version of what we now know as graphic tablets. But in reality, the technology just wasn't quite ready. You could only create very basic shapes, and the controls were clunky. Even worse, saving or transferring your work was nearly impossible, so anything you drew pretty much stayed trapped on the screen. Unsurprisingly, the CX-77 touch tablet failed to capture the excitement that Atari's games had. Sales were disappointing, and the device quietly faded into obscurity. Premier cigarettes. By the 1980s, smoking was under fire. With growing health concerns and increasing regulations, tobacco companies scrambled to find a safer way to smoke. Enter Premier cigarettes, a bold attempt by R.J. Reynolds to create a cigarette that didn't actually burn tobacco in the traditional way. Instead, it used a heated carbon tip to toast the tobacco, releasing vapors that passed through a flavor capsule before being inhaled. The idea was to reduce harmful smoke and tar, making it a cleaner alternative to regular cigarettes. On paper, this sounded like a groundbreaking innovation. R.J. Reynolds invested a staggering $300 million into research and development, believing this was the future of smoking. But there was just one problem. Smokers hated it. Early testers complained that it tasted like charcoal and smelled like burning plastic. Instead of delivering a smooth, satisfying experience, Premier cigarettes felt more like inhaling hot, chemically flavored air. On top of that, they were difficult to light and even harder to enjoy. Despite the massive investment, Premier never made it past the test phase, and the product was scrapped before reaching mass production. However, the concept wasn't entirely abandoned. Decades later, similar technology was refined into modern vaping devices and heated tobacco products. While Premier was a spectacular failure, it was arguably a failed first step toward the e-cigarettes we see today. Speaker vest. Long before AirPods and Bluetooth speakers became the go-to for music on the move, motorcyclists had a different way to enjoy their favorite tunes while riding: the speaker vest. This wasn't just a regular piece of biker gear. It was designed to turn any ride into a mobile concert. The concept was simple, but bold. This was a jacket with built-in speakers, allowing riders to blast their favorite music as they cruised down the road. It even had zip-off sleeves, giving it some extra versatility. Wear it as a full jacket on colder days, or switch to a vest when the weather was warm. It was all about looking like a true biker while adding a high-tech edge to your outfit. To use it, all you had to do was plug your portable stereo into the vest, and just like that, you were ready to hit the open road with your personal soundtrack playing loud and clear. The idea seemed great at the time, but it had some serious flaws. The biggest issue? Sound quality. At high speeds, the roar of the wind and the engine could easily drown out the speakers, making it less effective than it seemed. Plus, without headphones, everyone around you had to hear your music too, whether they wanted to or not. In the end, while the speaker vest was a cool concept, it never caught on in the long run. Today, most bikers opt for more discreet and practical solutions like wireless earbuds or helmet-integrated speakers. But, for a brief moment in the 1980s, this wild idea gave riders a new way to roll with their music. Ital-Design Capsula. In the 1980s, Transformers took the world by storm, sparking the imaginations of kids and adults alike. With cars that could shift into towering robots, the franchise made people wonder, what if a real vehicle could transform? 2. Enter Ital-Design Capsula, a bold concept from the legendary Italian design firm Ital-Design. Unlike Optimus Prime or Bumblebee, this car wouldn't turn into a robot, but it did promise a different kind of transformation. The idea was simple, yet ambitious. A modular vehicle that could change its entire function depending on the owner's needs. One day, it could be a spacious van, ready to haul furniture or heavy cargo. The next day, with a quick swap, it could transform into a sleek, sporty car built for cruising in style. The goal was to create a truly versatile automobile that could appeal to everyone: families, businesses, and car enthusiasts alike. While the concept was innovative, it never gained mass appeal. The technology of the time wasn't advanced enough to make these transformations easy, and consumers weren't quite ready for a car that could switch personalities. In the end, Italdesign Capsula remained just that, an exciting vision of what cars could be. But who knows? With modern advancements in modular design and electric vehicle technology, maybe someone will take another shot at bringing this idea to life. What's the strangest product you've ever purchased, whether from the 80s or another era? Electric doormat. In the early 1980s, German engineers came up with a high-tech solution to a simple everyday task: wiping your feet. Instead of the usual doormat that just sits there, waiting for you to scrape off dirt, they introduced the electric doormat. It was an automated motorized mat designed to clean your shoes without you having to do any of the work. This wasn't just a gimmick, it was a serious piece of engineering. The mat featured anti-tripping technology, with belts that looped over pulleys mounted on counter-rotating drums. As soon as someone stepped on it, the belts would gently roll beneath their feet, brushing off dirt and debris in the process. It was like a tiny treadmill for your shoes, meant to keep floors spotless without the usual back-and-forth foot scraping. The problem? Nobody really needed it. While the idea was innovative, the traditional doormat was already simple, effective, and, most importantly, cheap. The electric doormat, on the other hand, was expensive and overly complicated for what it did. Maintenance was also an issue, as mechanical parts could wear out or break over time. In the end, the classic doormat won out. People realized that sometimes low-tech solutions work just fine. While the electric doormat may have been ahead of its time, it ultimately proved that not every problem needs an elaborate, high-tech fix. UltiCard. In the 1980s, Smart Card International tried to change the way people handled money, security, and even personal health with an ambitious invention: the UltiCard, also known as the Everything Card. This wasn't just a regular credit card. It was designed to be a multi-purpose digital wallet, long before smartphones made that concept a reality. What made it different? The UltiCard featured a 2-line LCD screen and a 10-key alphanumeric keypad, making it look more like a tiny pocket calculator than a payment card. The idea was to replace multiple cards with a single device. It wasn't just a credit card, it also functioned as a bank card, a security access key, and even a payment method for parking meters and payphones. But the features didn't stop there. This little gadget was packed with futuristic ideas, including fingerprint storage for security, a place to store medical records, and even a calorie tracker for keeping tabs on your diet. In theory, it was the ultimate all-in-one personal finance and health tool. So why didn't it take off? The tech just wasn't ready. The card was too complex, required specialized infrastructure, and people weren't quite ready to give up their traditional wallets. In the end, it faded into obscurity. Ironically, the UltiCard was way ahead of its time, because today, smartphones do all of these things and more, proving that the vision wasn't wrong. It was just too early. Briefcase alarm. Back in the 1980s, business professionals carried briefcases everywhere, often filled with important documents, money, or even classified information. Naturally, the fear of briefcase theft was real, and that's where the briefcase alarm came in, a security gadget designed to strike fear into the hearts of thieves. The concept was simple but dramatic. If someone stole your briefcase, all you had to do was enter a secret code into a transmitter. The briefcase would then unleash a vision-clouding red smoke, making it impossible for the thief to see where they were going. At the same time, an ear-piercing alarm would start blaring, drawing attention to the culprit and ensuring that their getaway was anything but smooth. It was like having a personal security system built right into your bag. On paper, this sounded like a genius idea. After all, who wouldn't want a built-in anti-theft smoke bomb? But in reality, it never really caught on. Maybe people didn't want to risk setting it off accidentally. Maybe it was just too expensive. Or maybe, just maybe, business people didn't love the idea of their documents being covered in red smoke if things went wrong. New Coke and Diet Pepsi, AM. When you have a winning formula, the smart move is to leave it alone, right? Well, in 1985, Coca-Cola decided to do the opposite. They changed their world-famous recipe, launching what became one of the biggest marketing disasters in history: New Coke. The company thought they were making a bold move, tweaking the taste to compete with Pepsi, which was gaining popularity. But instead of winning over soda drinkers, New Coke was met with outrage. Fans didn't just dislike it, they hated it. The backlash was so intense that within a few months, Coca-Cola was forced to bring back the original formula, branding it as Coca-Cola Classic. For a while, both versions were sold side by side, but ultimately, New Coke fizzled out. However, thanks to the nostalgia-fueled success of Stranger Things, it made a brief, limited edition comeback years later. But Coke wasn't the only soda giant to stumble in the 1980s. In 1989, Pepsi tried to reinvent breakfast with Diet Pepsi AM, a soda designed for morning consumption. The idea? Give people an alternative to coffee by offering a soft drink with extra caffeine to kickstart their day. But consumers weren't interested. Most people still wanted their morning coffee, and those who drank soda for breakfast were already drinking regular Pepsi. Apple Newton. Before smartphones and tablets became an essential part of daily life, Apple had a bold vision for the future of mobile computing. In the late 1980s, they began developing what would become the Apple Newton, one of the first personal digital assistants, PDAs. Launched in 1993, the Newton was supposed to revolutionize the way people organized their lives, offering note-taking, calendar management, and even handwriting recognition, all in a portable, handheld device. On paper, it sounded like a game changer. The Newton could translate handwritten notes into digital text, store important information, and serve as a digital planner, a precursor to modern smartphones. But in reality, it had some major flaws. The device was bulky, expensive, and most infamously, its handwriting recognition software barely worked. Instead of smoothly converting handwriting into text, it often misread words, leading to frustration rather than convenience. Consumers expected cutting-edge technology, but instead, they got a device that felt unfinished and unreliable. By the late 1990s, Apple pulled the plug on the Newton, but its influence didn't disappear. The idea of a pocket-sized digital assistant would later evolve into the iPhone and iPad, proving that even Apple's failures could shape the future. Cabbage Patch Dolls. Few toys in history have caused as much chaos as Cabbage Patch Dolls did in the mid-1880s. These quirky, soft-bodied dolls with their signature round faces and yarn-like hair became the must-have toy almost overnight. Every kid wanted one, and every parent was determined to make it happen, no matter the cost. At first, the dolls seemed innocent enough. They were unique, each one slightly different, and they came with their own adoption papers, making them feel more like real babies than just another toy. But as demand skyrocketed, supply couldn't keep up. What happened next was absolute madness. During the holiday season, stores turned into battlegrounds. Parents shoved, pushed, and even physically fought over the limited stock. Crowds got so aggressive that some retailers had to call in the police to control the chaos. It was one of the first major toy crazes in history, one that retailers weren't prepared for. However, like many fads, the Cabbage Patch craze burned out as quickly as it started. By the late 80s, the hype had fizzled, and newer toys took over the spotlight. Still, the legend of the Cabbage Patch riots lives on as a reminder of just how far people will go for the hottest holiday toy. So, which food on this list brings back the most memories for you? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click on the bell icon to turn on notifications for upcoming videos. Thanks for watching.